First step is to snag hold.
Welcome, everyone. We'll be getting started in just a moment. Apparently I was on mute. So we're asking everyone to turn their video on. It says that it is disabled. Okay, let me see what that is. Dr. Lane, if you want to go ahead and begin, and I'll work on fixing the video issue. All of our speakers have been made co-hosts so that you may open up your video at this point in time.
Thankfully, and I'm not sure we can add anyone else unless they become co-hosts, because I think you have to do it in the original settings. But if you find something, let me know. I was just researching a little bit on that. But good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome to the Culturally Relevant and Inclusive Practices Advisory Committee. We're so excited to have all of you join us. You may have seen earlier today that Governor Northam released a press release about our work, and I'm excited to launch this with you today. For those of you that don't know me, I'm James Lane. I'm the Superintendent of Public Instruction here at the Virginia Department of Education. And I'm as anxious as all of us to begin this work with this distinguished body of education leaders from across the Commonwealth. We sincerely appreciate and value your commitment to ensuring that Virginia's students experience learning environments that are culturally relevant, responsive, and inclusive. It is our goal that every student should attend schools where educators facilitate and develop students' positive ethnic and cultural identities while simultaneously maintaining their ability to achieve academically. We envision a public education system where all students' identities are affirmed and teachers support students' abilities to recognize, understand, and critique current and past racial and social inequities. I thank you all for your commitment to this work and for lending your perspective and expertise to our shared goal of increasing the cultural proficiency of Virginia's education workforce. I have a few distinguished guests on the call today who would also like to bring introductions. After each of these individuals speak, I will come back and walk you through the charge of our committee and a little bit about what we hope to tackle today and into the future. And so I'd like to start by introducing Secretary Atif Carney, who is our Virginia Secretary of Education. Secretary Carney.
Good afternoon, Dr. Lane. Thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership and our Department of Education for undertaking this really important work. And I want to thank all of the committee members for this transformative, amazing committee that's going to be working diligently the next several months. I want to bring greetings on behalf of the governor. At some point, he's doing a press conference as we speak, but at some point, we'll make a request to get him to speak to you all as well at a future meeting for culturally relevant and inclusive education practices advisory group that's come together here for to undertake really important work. We're very excited. This is a really historic moment as this committee is starting its work, really seeking to expand the Commonwealth history standards to include voices of so many marginalized groups that have not been represented in our standards and curriculum. So we really want to equip our educators to teach more inclusive material with sensitivity and confidence. And there certainly is no progress without a thorough understanding of the past. So when we can sustain culturally responsive pedagogy, we can really enrich the lived experiences of our students by making sure that the standards we're focusing on are relevant to our students. We focus on deeper learning, and they can be transformative to their growth. So that's really important. And we also want to undertake and make sure that we teach an honest narrative of our past. A lot of you, when you applied to be on this committee, you're bringing a lot of expertise. You represent groups, different diasporas in our society, which have faced a lot of challenges. At the same time, these groups have also made a lot of contributions to what make America what it is, to make Virginia what it is. So I'm very, very excited that you're representing the different groups, and collectively, we will be able to tell a more inclusive narrative of our past and give students a better understanding of their place in history and equip them to improve our society for the future. So the work you'll do the next several months will have an impact not only on our children, but their children and for future generations after that. So I'm very excited about as we begin our journey in this work. I want to encourage you to lean on some of the folks who have worked with us in past commissions, specifically our African American History Commission. Some of the folks served on that the last year, and I'm really grateful for their work because that commission has really laid a strong foundation for this committee to build on the work. Also, in the next several months, as you're embarking on this work, you will come across a lot of other groups, whether it's different organizations or museums or Library of Virginia or public media groups like VPM and PBS, which you can really utilize as a resource to build on your work. So you'll get exposure to a lot of these different groups. So please take advantage of these groups. And you know, our Department of Education has amazing partnerships with these groups, and they will give you an opportunity to be exposed to these groups. So I certainly want to encourage you to keep that in mind. Finally, I'm really excited that to tell you all that we're going to be championing a historic piece of legislation, which we're calling the Culturally Competent Virginia Educators Bill. And this bill will focus on new training and professional development requirements to equip our educators with the skills and resources necessary to sustain culturally responsive classrooms, to really foster an important cultural competent atmosphere. And this proposal will also ensure that history and social sciences teachers have specific content knowledge to teach African American history with sensitivity and confidence. And the future initiatives can really build on that. And that's what we're, one of the things we're also hoping that will come out as recommendations from this committee. The governor's also proposed funding and resources to focus on whether it's staffing needs with personnel or whether it's to develop comprehensive professional development for in culturally responsive pedagogy for all Virginia educators. So the work that, in closing, one thing I'll emphasize that I emphasized with our previous commissions and that I emphasized with our African American History Education Commission, oftentimes when groups like this get together and they're embarking on this journey and coming up with a set of recommendations, two things that members often talk about is that, can this be done? Will there be the monies there to support the work? And whether there'll be a political will to support the work. Please don't get bogged down with those two barriers. We really want you to come up with a dream scenario. The groups that you're representing, and collectively as you're building the set of recommendations, please give us the ideal scenario on what you want to see happen in our educational settings, and let us in the governor's office or our Department of Education or our General Assembly leadership or our State Board of Education worry about how to implement that. We will find the resources, we will build whatever political will is necessary, we'll find ways, whether it's through regulation, whether it's through other agency actions, or whether it's through codifying things in the law. But please do not let that stop your dream scenario recommendations that you want to focus on. So that's why I'm just so excited to see the talent in this group, which is going to represent so many marginalized groups, whether it's Jewish Americans, whether it's our tribes, whether it's our LGBT community, whether it's our Asian American community. I'm an immigrant myself. I'm Muslim American. I'm very excited to see the Muslim historians who are going to be represented on this group. So I'm just so excited. This is an amazing opportunity. I feel like in our nation right now, as we're dealing with the global pandemic and as we're dealing with a lot of challenges, we're also going through an awakening of sorts, and we're charging ahead and creating a more inclusive society. So I'm really excited about this work. I feel that you can create a model that can be applied across the nation. I can tell you the work we did with the African American History Education Commission, many states are reaching out to us about this. I was on a call just yesterday with Kentucky. So a lot of states are excited to see what's happening in Virginia. So you have a huge opportunity here. So please do not hold back. Go full charging ahead. We want to hear from you. Really push us, push each other to come up with a robust set of recommendations. And again, I can't thank you enough. And I can't thank you enough the 3 committee chairs who you'll hear from shortly, who have really stepped up and will lead you through this work. And I cannot thank you enough, our Department of Education, who's just amazing. They always step up and do so much for us. So again, thank you so much on behalf of the governor and the rest of the administration and my office to really step up and do this work. Back to you, Dr. Lane.
Thank you, Secretary Carney. Appreciate your remarks. And we got a note from Leah that all of your videos should be working now. She is our resident expert on Zoom, and Leah, thank you for figuring that out for us. So feel free to turn your videos on. Next, we are so excited to have such great expertise in the leadership of the administration on this topic. And so I'd like to introduce to you next the Chief Diversity Officer for the Commonwealth of Virginia, Dr. Janice Underwood.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lane. On behalf of Governor Northam, good afternoon. Greetings, Secretary Carney, Dr. Lane, Ms. Walker, all advisory board members, elected officials, and everyone who may be joining in with us today. My name is Janice Underwood, Chief Diversity Officer to Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, but more importantly to the Commonwealth. I am a nationally board certified special education teacher who taught students a love of biology themselves and their communities using the principles of culturally relevant pedagogy for more than 16 years at Hampton High School, which what I'm saying is that CRP, as I call it, as many of you call it, this isn't a new concept for me. So I'm so pleased to be with you all today and to really, spotlight how we can use culturally relevant pedagogy to transform our pre-K through 12 spaces. Later in my career, I used this framework to inform my research in higher ed and reform teacher preparation programs at Old Dominion University, namely, as many of you know, the teacher in residence program and the science preparation programs more broadly. But now I use culturally relevant pedagogy to inform the equity work across the Commonwealth. And the bottom line is I believe in this framework to create policy and educational spaces that are culturally affirming and relevant. Several weeks ago, we were all moved toward critical consciousness with a keynote address from Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings when Virginia really took the lead as an exemplar for the nation under the leadership of Leah Walker in the rolling out of its equity policy, Virginia's Roadmap to Equity. But today, we further operationalize her work with this inaugural CRP advisory board. So that said, I'm so pleased to welcome all of the advisory board members at this inaugural meeting, and many of you whom I know and worked with personally, and how are you? Elbow butt to all of you. But some of you I don't know, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know you all. I'd like to share a few updates with you to really work in concert with Secretary Carney's comments. In addition to you knowing that I'm a willing partner in the work ahead, in part because of my research centering around critical race theory and culturally relevant pedagogy, I also want you to know that There is alignment among my office and the Office of the Secretary of Education and the Virginia Department of Education. First, I do want to share, I have a dream team now that was recently announced who are also willing partners in this work. I'd like to introduce Alacia Hackett, our lead Deputy Diversity Officer, Mona Siddiqui, Deputy Diversity Officer and Senior Policy Member to the new Office of New Americans, Yawande Austin, Special Advisor to the Chief Diversity Officer, and Michaela Swan, Special Assistant to the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And the reason I mention them is they will be working with us, you and I, to advance this work. And so I just want to make sure that you know who they are, and maybe at a later time I can more formally introduce them to you. Secondly, my team and I will be launching the One Virginia Plan in the coming weeks, and we want to make sure we tell you all about it and send you information for you to review it. It's really a strategic plan for state agencies and other public and private partners to advance inclusive excellence. The One Virginia Plan rests on the inclusive excellence framework, but it is also uniquely undergirded by the culturally relevant pedagogy framework. So I'm using the CRP framework in the One Virginia Plan to help encourage all of our state agencies to develop strategic plans that actually institutionalize mechanisms of cultural competence and critical consciousness. They may not know that that's what it's kind of really doing, and they may not have ever heard of culturally relevant pedagogy, but the teacher in me knows what the meat and bones of the lesson plans, right? And we're doing so in a way that really goes beyond superficial and reactive racial equity statements that many of us saw happening in May and June and July of this year, of 2020, actually. So the exciting part about the One Virginia Plan is that we are creating an online toolkit, and these tools and resources could help K-12 settings operationalize VDOE's equity policies and VDOE's expectations for genuine education equity. So I look forward to sharing more with you about this and possible ways we can integrate culturally relevant pedagogy into a pre-K version of the One Virginia Plan down the line. I ask that when you get a chance, please do visit our website to learn more about my new dream team, the One Virginia Plan, and ways that we can possibly work together. I'm going to ask Michaela, who's on the line with us, to put a link in the chat box to the One Virginia Plan and to the new team. In closing, while we have a lot of work to do, as Secretary Carney mentioned, this is historic work ahead. And I'm so pleased. In fact, I count it a privilege to do this work with you. It's the work, it's the framework that has undergirded all my research, so I strongly believe in it. But I also strongly believe that we are one Virginia, and there's more that unites us than divides us. And so I look forward to working with you all in the days and weeks and months to come. And please do count me a willing partner. Thank you so much. Secretary Lane, or Secretary Carney, back to you, or Dr. Lane, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. We do appreciate it. We would now like to introduce you to the committee co-chairs. The first co-chair I would like to introduce to you is a member of the Virginia Senate and one of the patrons of the bill that led to the creation of this committee. And so with that, I'd like to introduce you to the Honorable Senator Jennifer Boysko.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lane. It is, I'm really thrilled today to be with you all, to see that we're actually going to do this good work. And to give you a little background on what inspired me to carry the legislation, I was contacted by a group of Jewish community members who were pointing out the incidents of hate actions in our part of Northern Virginia where I represent. I live in one of the most diverse communities in Virginia, in the Herndon, Reston, Leesburg, Dulles Airport area. And we have people from all over the world who are educated in our public schools. And it was really thrilling for me to have my children know people from all over the place, and to understand that everybody is different and everybody brings something to the table. But we know that that is not, we need to educate people about their histories and their backgrounds and what brought people to the United States, what achievements they had and what they're proud of. And also sometimes People are fleeing hardship, and we want our students and our teachers to understand where people are coming from so that we are kinder and more compassionate and work together in a better way than we have been. We've seen a lot of discord, I guess is a nice way to put it, over the past few years, where people are not understanding one another and they're not taking the time to learn about each other's differences. And it's, in that aspect is my hope that through our efforts on this commission and with all of our wonderful teachers and educators around Virginia, that we give people the opportunity to learn from one another, to honor one another, to have respect and compassion, and unify, as opposed to see people as the other. And it is just my great pleasure to be with you all, to be a part of this. And Secretary Carney, that you and the governor are strongly supporting this, and Dr. Underwood and Dr. Lang, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this historic effort to build cultural competency and to strengthen our bonds with one another. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Senator Boysko. Next, our second committee co-chair is a member of the Virginia Board of Education and currently serves as the superintendent of Arlington County Public Schools, Dr. Francisco Duran.
Thank you, Dr. Lane, and it's a pleasure to be here serving as co-chair. Thank you, Senator Boysko, for your leadership in having this bill move forward. This is such important work. I'm excited to be in Virginia, that we're a state that acknowledges and recognizes, but not only that, because a lot of people like to talk about equity and say it's something we need to do and espouse to do, but this is an example of the work that needs to be done. I often say equity is about walking the walk as well as talking the talk, and so thank you for that, Senator Boysko, and it's a pleasure to be here. As a member of the Virginia Board of Education, I want to bring greetings on behalf of my colleagues. I look forward to bringing back the work we're doing here towards my colleagues on the Virginia Board of Education and any actions that need to be taken as a result of our recommendations. The board, as you know, unanimously supported the recent work of the Commission on African American History Education, and we were so thrilled to receive that report, and I want to thank that commission, which started out this work that really made sure that we are teaching content in Virginia that is accurate and inclusive of all students, and in this case, a historically marginalized group of students or African-American students who have not been a part of the curriculum and who show up every day to classrooms, not seeing themselves in what they're being taught and what they're learning. And so that to me is the beginning of what we need to do and consider for all of our marginalized students or students who have not been a part of the curriculum. Growing up as a young Latino student, I did not see myself very often in the curriculum, and I was challenged to have to go and find. And fortunately, I had a grandmother who often would read to me books about our history and our culture late at night, and that was my way to learn about my culture, but I didn't learn about it in school. And I often felt and questioned as a young child, who was I? Was I a part of this city, state, school? Did I belong? Did I not belong? Why wasn't I learning about my family's history? Why was I only learning that at home? And so from a personal perspective, I know the power of this. As an educator for 28 years, I know the power of this work, and I really look forward to bringing all of the voices and the perspectives to the table. We can and we will walk the walk while we talk the talk of equity. The State Board of Ed, we've done a lot of actions in the area of equity. We want to continue to support this work. And thank you, Dr. Lane, for your leadership as well, working with the Virginia Board of Education. It's my pleasure and honor to represent them here as a co-chair of the committee.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. And our final co-chair is the Dean of the Virginia Commonwealth University School of Education, Dr. Andrew Dare.
Good afternoon, everyone. And this is just such an exciting opportunity for all of us, and an exciting opportunity for the Commonwealth, and most importantly, an exciting opportunity for all of our school children. I'm excited and proud to be the Dean of the School of Education at VCU. And since my arrival in 2016, we've really been leaning even more heavily into how we can prepare our educators to be impactful with all school children, particularly our underrepresented, our historically marginalized, and our school children living in poverty. It's also an exciting time to be in Virginia and to be an educator preparation program dean because of the incredible leadership from our governor, from our state superintendent, you, Dr. Lane, Secretary Carney, and the Board of Education, Virginia Department of Education, particularly our Equity and Community Engagement Office under Leah Walker's leadership. Just what we have done is really a model for what needs to be done across the country. And it's exciting to be a part of that. We have implemented and continue to implement initiatives that will be so impactful for our folks in the K-12 sector. But I always ask the question, what about those who are preparing the educators? And unfortunately, higher education can be a very large ship to move. But if you want something to happen, you make it policy, you create the guidelines. And so that's why I'm particularly excited about the third recommendation, which also talks about policies and regulations governing teacher preparation programs. You know, we're the ones that are preparing the educators. So unless we have those same expectations that the K-12 teachers have, the K-12 leaders have, the expectations of what those students are supposed to experience in the classroom, then there's a gear, an important gear that is missing. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited about the work that we're going to do. And thank you so much, Honorable Boysko, for taking the lead on this. This is a type of leadership, I think, with so many of our leaders here in the Commonwealth that will lead to transformational experiences for all of our school children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dare. And my notes here would like to ask everyone to introduce yourselves. For time's sake, we would just like you to share your name and whatever primary role you would like to share in terms of what led to your work being on this committee. I should mention that we have 54 panelists, but we also have 15 attendees. We have additional attendees in the meeting that are part of our teacher advisory council that I'll talk a little bit more later. But at this time, we're going to go through those individuals that are members of the committee. And Leah, I don't know if this is easier for you to do or if you mind doing this, but maybe so that people aren't jumping over each other, maybe call people one by one.
Sure, happy to do that, Dr. Lane.
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. So we will start with Brenda Muse.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brenda Muse. I currently serve as the Director of Curriculum Instruction for Franklin County Public Schools, and I'm delighted to be on this committee.
Thank you. Chief Adams.
Hello, everyone. This is Ken Adams. I'm a Chief Emeritus of the Upper Mattaponi Indian Tribe in King William County, Virginia. I am so excited to be a part of this. And I wanted to give kudos to Leah from the people that are out here in the Netherlands, so to speak. She's been an amazing advocate for equity education for the Virginia Indian community. I want to just share one little quick thing. When I was a young boy growing up in King William County, Virginia, I was one of 10 children. And 8 out of those 10 children had to leave their home in King William County in order to get a high school education. This is back in the 50s and 60s, not that long ago. And to come around to this point where we're talking about equity in education for Virginia Indians is an amazing step for me. And I'm thanking everyone who is participating in this effort, including all the leaders in education in the Commonwealth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chief. Amara Decor. If I say your name wrong, please forgive me.
You said it beautifully. It's my pleasure to be a part of this inaugural committee. My name is Dr. Mara DeCure. I'm a professorial lecturer at American University and a proud, joyful resident here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. At American University, I serve as our university's inaugural Inclusive Pedagogy Fellow. I do work in the areas of culturally responsive pedagogy and anti-racist pedagogy, with a particular attention to the needs of marginalized students. So I feel very much at home on this committee, even though we're at day one, hour one, and I'm excited to move forward with the group.
Thank you. Dr. Monica Robinson.
Hello, I'm Dr. Monica Robinson. I am the K-12 Academic Support Coordinator for Virginia Beach City Public Schools, and I'm very excited to be a part of this important work.
Wonderful. Patty Smith.
Hi, everybody. I'm Patty Smith. I am a teacher. I teach English at the Appomattox Regional Governor's School in Chester. It's my 15th year teaching there. I've been a teacher for 35 years, elementary school through college. And I was an early participant in GLSEN back when it began in Massachusetts in the 80s. And I've been doing a lot of LGBTQ work ever since then, and I'm so excited to be part of this group and this committee, and thank you so much for having me, and I'm really looking forward to our work.
Thank you. Lyons. And even though I've known you for many years, Lyons, I still cannot pronounce your last name.
That's okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Lyons Sanchez Concha, and I'm an educator with Richmond Public Schools. I immigrated from Peru just in time for kindergarten. So I'm a very proud product of Virginia Public Schools. I'm also representing the Virginia's Latino Advisory Board for Governor Northam, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Monica Starwechter.
It's a mouthful, but it is very phonetic. I'm Monica Starkweather. I am an ESL teacher, K-12 in New Kent County. It's exactly between Richmond and Williamsburg. So if you've been on your travels to Virginia Beach, you've passed us. I'm also representing as a past president, the Virginia TESOL organization, the Teachers for Speakers of English of Other Languages. Excuse the children in the background.
No worries. Thank you. Welcome, Elena Baum.
Excuse me, I'm Elena Baum. I am director of the Holocaust Commission of the United Jewish Federation of Tidewater. We are an organization that provides supplemental Holocaust education to not only our public and private schools in Virginia, but also to our military commands and others who use our programs. We have been promoting tolerance, justice, and moral courage education for years and are thrilled to be a part of this, this commission and all of the work that we're doing.
Thank you. Welcome. Delegate von Valkenburg.
Hey everybody, my name is Skylar Van Valkenburg. I'm a delegate for the 72nd District in Henrico County, but more importantly for the purposes of this, I am in my 16th year teaching government. I've taught a variety of history classes as well. And just a fun, cool, quick anecdote about this commission is I remember the day when it came through the SOL-SOQ subcommittee, which I chair, and the Richmond Jewish Federation, which was a big advocate for setting this up, had one of their young members testify in their name, and of course she is now my student this year. So I have a kind of I have a person who can kind of stay on top of me in class day to day on this commission. So I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Thelma Williams Tunstall. You're muted, Ms. Tunstall.
Okay, is that better? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am pleased to be here. Having been in education for 35 years and having worked K-12 as a specialist, and then I had the opportunity to head a program called the Teaching American History Academy, where we work with teachers to make sure that they had the information they needed to help expose students, especially in the areas of history and social science. So that really gave us the experiences. We traveled places, we talked, and we told them because they had so many things they were not familiar with, and that helped. And then I've traveled to other countries analyzing and looking at education to see what the secrets are to motivate our kids and our teachers. So I'm very pleased to be here, and I've seen some good work done by this committee and a few more suggestions and things that I have in the back of my head that I'm eager to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Dr. Grimes, and she'll be followed by Deborah March.
Hello, everyone. I am Tamisha Grimes, Superintendent of Nottoway County Public Schools.
We can't hear you, Dr. Grimes.
Oh, my goodness.
A little louder. There you go.
Okay, it's this computer. Hi, everyone. I'm Tamisha Grimes, Superintendent of Nottoway County Public Schools, and I'm also a member of the Virginia Department of Education's African American Superintendent's Advisory.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Deborah March. I am the Culturally Responsive Pedagogy Specialist for Fairfax County Public Schools, where I support the social studies team and other academic content areas with curriculum revision and professional learning to ensure that all students are affirmed in their identities and empowered as learners. And I'm thrilled to serve on this committee with you all.
Thank you. Dr. Birdwright?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Angela Bird-Wright. I serve as the mathematics curriculum leader for K-12 education with Hampton City Schools. I am delighted to be a part of this committee. I have a true passion for mathematics for anyone who knows me. But prior to my role as the mathematics curriculum leader with Hampton City Schools, I served as a mathematics teacher, mathematics coach, assistant principal, secondary math specialist, as well as a middle school principal. And so through that lens, though, and also through my doctoral work with culturally responsive leadership practices and instruction, I know that some of the work and my knowledge base will be a part of this committee. And I'm so excited to share some of my knowledge with the committee and learn from each and every one of you and help to move this work forward for our Commonwealth. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Dr. Bolam, Kristen Bolam. You're muted, Ms. Bolam.
Thank you so much. Hello, I'm Kristen Bolam. I'm the very proud principal of Mount Vernon Elementary School in York County, which is in the Tidewater region of Virginia. In addition to my work here in the county, I am also a doctoral student at Liberty University, and I am completing my dissertation in the area of CRP. So I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful. Catherine Atkins.
Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Adkins. I'm a teacher at Bassett High School in Henry County Public Schools in Southwest Virginia. I am a part of the African American History pilot program that was launched this fall as a part of the work that this wonderful team has been doing. I'm also the lead teacher for our equity committee at my school and also a member of our equity team at our district level. Excited to be here and sharing this work with you all.
Thank you. Kirk Moyers.
Hi, my name is Kirk Moyers. I am the Secondary Social Studies Coordinator for Harrisonburg City Public Schools, where I also serve on the Equity Advisory Committee. I work with a lot of our students in various equity programs that I don't think I'm allowed to plug in this platform. And I'm also the past president of the Virginia Social Studies Leadership Consortium.
Thank you. Austin Hauk.
Hey everybody, I'm Austin Hauk. I am a student at UVA in Charlottesville. I am a queer activist, and I'm hoping to work with this committee and be a voice for the LGBTQ community, and especially the students' point of view for this curriculum, having just very recently graduated from the public school system myself. So I'm really happy to be here.
Welcome. Megan Nobriga.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Megan Denalberga, and I am the Director of Special Education Services in Bristol, Virginia Public Schools. As a prior elementary education principal for many years, and now in my current role and having just completed a dissertation on culturally responsive restorative practices, I'm very excited to be here and be part of this committee.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Kristen Williams. Kristen, if you're speaking.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry, I was muted. I'm Kristen Williams. I'm the mathematics and special education specialist at the Virginia Department of Education, and I've had experience in both the general education setting and special education setting. And I'm really excited to learn from all of you about culturally responsive pedagogy, really learning how to integrate it in all of our work in mathematics and special education.
Thank you. Dr. Santiago, Jennifer Santiago.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jennifer Santiago. I'm the Director of Equity and Excellence for Falls Church City Public Schools and a former ESOL teacher, and I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful, thank you. Jessica Morris.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Morris. I'm currently the Director of Special Education in Giles County, which is in Southwest Virginia, right on the line with West Virginia. I have a background, of course, in special ed and also early childhood education, and I've spent some time as an instructor at the university level, incorporating culturally responsive practice in my courses. So I'm excited to be here.
Welcome. Next up is Colleen Eddy.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Colleen Eddy. I am the coordinator for secondary curriculum integration and management and instructional services with Fairfax County Public Schools. I'm formerly the coordinator of K-12 social studies, where I've had the opportunity to work with Dr. Deborah March for several years. And I'm glad to be here. We've been leading curriculum reform that is much needed, much overdue in social studies in collaboration with other divisions across the state. And I'm eager to continue the work with you.
Thank you. Maria Burgo. I'm sorry, why did I say your name wrong?
Yes, Maria Burgos, and I tell you, I am so delighted to be in the company of so many people that are going to give so much work and dedication to this project, because I am going to learn right along with you. When I say I am the person who enters the room, the girl who was 9 years old, like Francisco Duran, who arrived here from Panama, literally out of a jungle, and where we lived along a river in a hut among indigenous people. And my first language is the framework in which I work from. I grew up in an African-American community. My children are African-American and Latino. And that is who I am, and that who comes to the work every day to do this work. It is my passion and dedication to the children and to our educational system and to our students and teachers and community at large that culturally responsive instruction will be the way in which we engage our students in a much deeper level. So currently right now I serve in the position of supervisor of global learning and culturally responsive instruction, and also had the pleasure and honor of working in the American History Education Commission. But most of all, I'm so grateful to be here among all of you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Next up is Sam. I spotlighted you and your name went away. Burhead?
That's okay. That's okay. You said it perfect. My name is Siyum Berhe. I am the Virginia State Coordinator working with refugees who come to our Commonwealth from all over the world. I am also now the director of the New American Office of New Americans, Dr. Underwood was talking about. I am excited to be part of this board. I love the fact that Virginia is actually finding itself as a mirror of its residents. And this gives me a lot of pleasure. I'm looking forward to working with all of you.
Thank you. Next up is Dr. Carolyn Waters.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carolyn Waters. I'm an ESL teacher at Falling Creek Middle School in Chesterfield County. And I've worked with multilingual learners in Virginia for over 25 years. I feel very privileged to be here today, and I'm very excited about this work.
Thank you and welcome. Next up is Dr. Valeka Gatling.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Valeka Gatling. I'm currently serving as the Director of Diversity Initiatives at Old Dominion University. I am so excited to represent the university as well as the Virginia Association for Supervision of Curriculum and Development. I serve as the Region 2 representative for VASCD. I also serve as an assistant professor in the College of Education at Old Dominion University in Ed Leadership. And I have spent the past 27 years working in public education. Most recently spent 25 years in PK-12, and so I spent the last 2 in higher education. And so I'm so excited to be a part of this group. I have spent my entire life in the state of Virginia, receiving 3 degrees. And so it's no better time to be in the state of Virginia to be able to give back to the state in another way in which it has definitely been extraordinarily wonderful to me. And so I'm excited to continue to learn in this space and privileged to be with each and every one of you.
Wonderful, thank you. Next up is Dr. Ghassan Tarazi, and we are going to just ask if you all could please keep your remarks to just an introduction of yourself. We don't want to run out of time, and we have a very full agenda. Thank you so much.
I'm so lucky to have had that warning. I'm an immigrant and an educator for 37 years, starting out as a social studies teacher in New York and ending my career as a professor in the College of Education at James Madison University. And I also am a member of the Virginia Coalition for Human Rights. And I'm very excited to be part of this very much needed work. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Carla Akuchi.
Aloha, Carla Okuuchi. I'm a proud product of Fairfax County Public Schools and a music teacher there. And I'm here with Governor Northam's Virginia Asian Advisory Board, where I serve as chair for our education subcommittee. Excited to do this work along with you.
Thank you. Hyun Lee.
Oh, hello, everyone. This is Hyun Lee. I am a member of Virginia Asian Advisory Board, also an adjunct professor at I Global University, working with a lot of international students, and also a doctoral student at American University studying education policy and leadership. And I'm extremely honored to be here working with you moving forward. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Divya Lobo, who will be followed by Steve Legowick.
Hi, I'm Divya Lobo, a senior at Dominion High School and the Academies of Loudoun. I'm a senior analyst at a student-run think tank, and I hope to bring a student's perspective to this great change.
Good afternoon, I'm Steve Legowitz, coordinator of K-12 Social Studies with Williamsburg, James City County Schools, and also a proud member of our equity committee, current EDD student at the College of William & Mary, and a proud former American history teacher.
Wonderful, thank you and welcome. Next up is Jared Morris.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jared Morris. I am in Madison County Public Schools. I'm currently the division curriculum innovation lead, but there we wear many hats being a small division. Also a former American history teacher and looking forward to providing what I can, but most of all learning from you all. Honored to be here.
Thank you. Stephen Kreger.
It's me. Hey, I'm Stephen Kreger. I'm an elementary school art teacher way down in Bristol, Virginia, very close to the Tennessee line. And I'm just excited to be here. Like, I'm just excited to be here.
Welcome. Dr. Christine Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christine Harris. I'm the Director of Humanities at the Virginia Department of Education, and it's a pleasure to support the committee.
Thank you. Emma Violan Sanchez.
Yeah, good. Buenas tardes. I'm Emma Violan Sanchez, immigrant from Bolivia, came to Virginia in 1961. So I have 40 years of experience in the Arlington Public Schools, from being the first Latina teacher, first Latina administrator, and later the first Latina elected school board member. So I bring the experience of culturally and linguistically diverse students, having taught at Georgetown University also for 20 years. And I am a proud founder and chair of the board of the DREAM Project, providing support to undocumented students in Virginia. Thank you.
Welcome, thank you. Jennifer Goss.
I'm Jennifer Goss, and I am a social studies department chair in Stanton, Virginia at Stanton High School, where I also teach AP Government, US History, and a Holocaust and Genocide Studies elective. I'm actually a transplant to Virginia, and I've loved living here for the past 9 years. I also do a variety of consulting work in Holocaust education for institutions and organizations around the country. So it's good to see some familiar faces that I've worked with before.
Thank you. Dr. Jessica Costa.
I'm the English Learner Instruction Specialist for the Virginia Department of Education. Very excited about this work. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, I did that one already. Okay. Who's left? Kelly Bazoingo.
Kelly Bisogno, and I'm the coordinator of fine arts from the Virginia Department of Education, and I look forward to supporting this work as well.
Thank you. Welcome. Brandy McCracken.
Hello, everyone. Very excited to join this work. And my name is Brandy McCracken. I'm the history specialist for elementary at the Department of Education.
Wonderful. Welcome. Holly Coy.
Good afternoon, everybody. Holly Coy, Assistant Superintendent for Policy, Equity, and Communications, and delighted to be joining you all.
Thank you. Jessica Morris.
I already went.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. My pictures got moved. Dr. Rachel Gomez.
Hi there. I'm Rachel Gomez. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Teaching and Learning at VCU. I'm also I-Cubed faculty as the Institute for Innovation, Inquiry, and Inclusion, where I'm part of the Urban Education and Families Corps. My background is in ethnic studies. I am Chicana, first generation college grad. My research centers on the way that critical pedagogies affect the socio-political development and critical consciousness of youth of color. I'm excited to be here and work with y'all where we can center and treasure the experiences of Black and Latinx youth.
Thank you. Ilham Nasser.
Yes, hi, how are you all? This is Ilham Nasser. I am a senior researcher at the International Institute of Islamic Thought. I'm also a board member of the National Arab American Women Association. We do work across Virginia on examining textbooks and the representation of Arab Americans in curriculum and in teaching materials. I spent many years of my life in higher education and teacher preparation, especially looking at cultural responsive practice and ways we can introduce multicultural, multilingual approaches to education. Happy to be here and to serve, and thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. Dr. Herb Monroe.
How you doing, everyone? It's a plum pleasing pleasure to be here today. And as a son of two principals, education is truly the great equalizer. Again, I'm currently the assistant superintendent for Caroline County Public Schools. I facilitate a plethora of equity, diversity, and inclusion work throughout the state. I normally have numerous presentations for VAS, VS, ACD, and I also facilitate trainings for the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities. And I just want to say that again, I'm honored to be a part of this great work and awesome group of people as we
Thank you.
lead with love. Thank you.
Welcome. Andrea Emerson.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Emerson, and I am the VDOE History and Social Science Secondary Specialist, and I'm excited to be here today.
Okay, I hope we got everyone. Christania Brown, are you here? I didn't see your picture on screen. If you don't have your camera on, I can't see that you're in the meeting. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, please turn your camera on so that you can do so. There you are, Christania. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Christania Brown. I am the History and Social Science Coordinator at the Virginia Department of Education, and we are so very excited that you all have applied and will be working with us on not only the History and Social Science standards of learning, but also to really engage culturally responsive teaching practices. So Leah, are we going to go ahead and get started with our next presentation?
Yes, I believe that we are, Dr. Lane is still up. So Dr. Lane, if you want to come back to the forefront and turn your camera back on, we're ready to get into our very packed agenda.
Thanks, Leah. Yes, Christania and Leah, I will be turning it over to you in a minute, but I do have just a little bit of content that I would like to share just to set the stage for our committee's work. And I first appreciate everyone taking the time to introduce yourselves. Today's meeting is generally introductory. We're going to spend some time going through the legislation that authorized this committee. We're going to go through some information about work being done at the department. And so I just want to prepare you that today you'll be receiving a lot of content, but I guarantee you that our future meetings will have a lot more discussion and engagement from the committee. But today's purpose is really just to level set expectations, logistics, and information about the work that's ahead of us. We had over 120 individuals apply to serve on this committee. We received a very large pool of very qualified candidates. It was a thorough and painstaking evaluation of all applications that led to the final selection of those individuals that balance our stakeholder representation from geographic locations through education and experience and knowledge of content standards and culturally responsive teaching practices. There were applicants not selected for this committee with instructional experience, and those individuals have been invited to serve on the Teacher Advisory Committee. And I want to also welcome those members to our committee meeting as well. They are not panelists, but they are attendees on the webinar so that they can learn and inform their work as they advise us. On behalf of the VDOE, thank you to those teachers that have agreed to serve in this capacity. Today's meeting will focus on the organization of the committee and review of the work already underway in Virginia. So in a moment, I will review our committee charge, our structure, our work plan, and then Christania Brown and Leah Walker will overview the African American History Education Committee's status and recommendations. They'll talk about the standards review and revisions, and they'll talk about professional development recommendations that came out of that work. Then we'll have a little discussion on the vision for culturally responsive education in Virginia by sharing with you our EdEquity VA framework and further information on the research and recommendations that came out of the African American History Education Committee. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about next steps and have our future committee meeting discussion. As you'll see on the screen here, this committee was formed following legislation from House Bill 916 and Senate Bill 853. And so I will not read this language to you, but I wanted you to know that this was formed as part of that legislation I mentioned that Senator Boysko helped patron. So to our committee charge. First and foremost, we have been tasked with providing standards recommendations to the Department of Education that we will consider in making presentations to the Board of Education during the 21-22 review of the History and Social Science Standards of Learning. We will also make recommendations for the issuance of Board of Education guidelines for local school division staff, including teachers and school counselors, to offer age-appropriate anti-bias education to students. And finally, on the next slide, we will make recommendations on meaningful professional development with school personnel related to culturally relevant and inclusive education practices. This shall include, but will not be limited to, considerations for the policies and regulations governing teacher prep programs, and the policies and regulations governing teacher licensure and professional development requirements for licensure personnel. So with that charge, I'll tell you a little bit about how we will be implementing our work. There will be a standards subcommittee. Our co-chair, Dr. Francisco Duran, will lead that group along with Dr. Harris and Ms. Brown, supporting that from the Virginia Department of Education. And you will see that the standards subcommittee will focus on charge 1, that focus on standards that should be considered in the review. Next, we will have a professional development subcommittee. Their work will focus on the recommendations of charge 2 and 3. And that will be that we issue recommendations for the Board of Education to consider guidelines for local school division staff, teachers, counselors to offer age-appropriate anti-bias education to students, and recommendations on meaningful professional development with school personnel. And again, I read some of this already, but that subcommittee will be led by Dr. Andrew Dare, and Ms. Leah Walker and Ms. Janae Nurse from the Virginia Department of Education will support that subcommittee. Finally, I do again want to mention our Culturally Responsive Practices Teacher Advisory Committee, who are on the call. Given the extraordinary interest in this topic around the state, we did create a teacher advisory committee to support our work. This committee brings together educators with experience in the development of culturally relevant pedagogy, resources, and materials that recognize the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. This new committee will advise the department on resource development and culturally relevant teaching. They're invited to join us here today to ensure that they align their work with our work. Although the Teacher Advisory Committee will begin their work with resources and culturally relevant pedagogy related to the history and social science discipline, their work will actually expand across all areas. And Ms. Christania Brown and Ms. Brandy McCracken will support their work. And so I'm going to move now to our committee work plan. The committee is charged with delivering a report of our recommendations no later than July 1. So we're starting today again with this introductory work. We'll again share the Virginia History Standards review process and the vision for realigning professional development. You'll see here on this slide, I won't read every bit of this to you, planned work in February and March. We plan to have no meeting in April, further work in May, no meeting in June, and then finally, the final document will be presented to the commission after it's finalized and sent on July 1. All meetings on these dates will take place from 2 to 4 p.m. And we look forward to, you will get a copy of this so that we'll make sure that these dates are on your calendars. Next, I want to talk a little bit about committee communications. Full committee meeting notifications will come from the Office of Equity and Community Engagement at the Department of Education. So you'll probably hear directly from Leah or Janae on that. We have also established a committee webpage. And so this link again will be provided to you so that you can access the webpage. On the webpage, we have already added materials. This meeting agenda is there. The meeting schedule and committee work plan will be there. The roster of committee members is there. The committee purpose and charge is there. The authorizing legislation is there. The report from the African American History Education Committee is there. Our Virginia Equity Framework, which we call Navigating the Ed Equity VA Roadmap, is there. And also some definitions for culturally responsive practice for Virginia educators. And finally, on that website, you will also see draft subcommittee assignments. And so please take a moment when you get a chance to view that link and see where we have slated you for some of our subcommittee work. There will also be a public Dropbox where we'll store all meeting materials, and it will be linked to the committee page. We will be accepting public comment, and we have several members of the community that have signed up for public comment today. You must sign up in advance by emailing us at edequityva@doe.virginia.gov. Advanced registration is required, and we will only have public comment at our full committee meetings. Because this committee is a public body, all meetings will be live streamed on the VDOE YouTube channel and be recorded. The recordings will be posted on the Virginians for Learners website, where a new page is being created for this committee. As I mentioned before, recordings will also be shared in the public Dropbox folder. I want to remind all members of the committee that all records of the committee are subject to FOIA, and so make sure that you are aware of that as you make communications. Again, for members of the public wishing to make public comment, you must register in advance. You will see the registration links for public comment included in our meeting schedule, and you can also email Leah at the DOE to do that. So I went through that quickly because I really do want to get into the meat of some of our presentations. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Leah Walker and Christania Brown, who will lead our discussion on the African American history education recommendations and implementation strategies.
Christania, you are up first, my friend. And so I'm going to go directly to your slide.
Thank you. Again, good afternoon, everyone. We are so excited to finally begin this work. A lot of pre-planning has gone into getting everything ready. So here we go. The African American History Education Commission was formed through the governor's office, and they were basically charged with three major objectives. And next slide, Leah. Thank you. First was to make recommendations for technical edits to the Virginia History and Social Science Standards of Learning. The second was to really look at how the standards can be organized and improve the instruction in the classroom to give a more comprehensive picture of African Americans and their stories. And then lastly was to make recommendations on how Virginia can improve the process. And so what I'm going to do is go through basically what that standard subcommittee did. Next slide, please. So because there were so many different objectives that the standard subcommittee had, they decided to break up into three separate work groups, and each work group worked feverishly and then reported their information back to the larger committee for approval. Again, they spent countless hours. We had many evenings where we were discussing the standards, the curriculum framework, the content, what's best for classroom instruction, reviewing the process and the edits. They recommended changing the way history and social science courses are ordered so that the content has more of a thematic approach to just chronological. And lastly, they concluded that in order for students, and I want to make sure that you really pay attention to this last one because this is very close to my heart, in order for students to develop a deeper understanding and comprehension of African American history in the larger narrative, the learning must start at kindergarten, and there needs to be dedicated time for history and social science instruction. So that was the large group's basic charge, and they broke up again, like I said earlier, into three different work groups. The first work group, next slide. There we go. The first group was about technical edits. So the first thing that they looked at was the language at the elementary level and thinking about that language and how it can be more inclusive, cover diverse backgrounds, and highlight African American neighborhoods so that there was more of a connection to the community and our local history. Next, they looked at historical figures to make sure that those historical figures were not only diverse in their contributions, but also their perspectives. Many times, history teachers talk about when they're teaching about African Americans, we teach about the big three: Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and Dr. King. So the African American History Education Commission really looked at the people that we were highlighting and also how can we add to that so that we have diverse perspectives and contributions. Next, terms and content to be introduced in earlier grades. Can you go back one for me, Leah? Thank you. Terms and content, thinking about earlier grades introducing this African-American history that we're talking about, and how can it be more integrated into the larger narrative. And then lastly, the technical edits group really looked at correcting US history curriculum frameworks in specific areas dealing with slavery, the abolitionist movement, the Civil War, Reconstruction, lynching, and other matters that are important to African-American history that may have been omitted or distorted. Next slide. The second work group that fell under the standards subcommittee was the standards overhaul work group. This work group really focused on those themes or concepts to ensure that African-American history is not segregated from US history in general. So as you can see on your screens right now, these are the 10 concepts that the commission recommended that should flow throughout US history. Next slide. The standards overhaul work group also recommended the revision or elimination of standards that are inaccurate or outdated. And a question came up before, what do you mean by outdated? And just like in science, you discover new things. And so that kind of changes the history. History is not monolithic and it's not still. It changes as we discover new documents, as we discover new artifacts, as we discover new information. So the information that was inaccurate or out of date, the overhaul work group recommended that that information be eliminated. And then lastly, securing funds for professional development so that teachers are better able or better prepared to teach the information that has been implemented or recommended. Next slide. The last group was the process revision work group. This group was basically responsible for looking at the process that we use to review and revise the standards of learning and make recommendations as to how that process can be more inclusive of not only different experiences, different cultural perspectives, and then also pedagogical preferences are represented throughout. So the steering committee, they also recommended, they recommended that we convene a steering committee that is comprised of external content experts and practitioners to review and revise the content that's being recommended during the process. This next one, providing outreach to encourage parents, students, and educators and administrators from across the Commonwealth to provide feedback. Many times people know and understand that they can submit public comment, but they're many times not really understanding what those public comments or how impactful those public comments will be to the larger process. Next, to ensure that all comments, perspectives, and events are thoroughly vetted, they were looking for this extra or expansion of content experts really look at the comments also. In the past, we've had our educators look at the public comments and many people on our external committees, but they suggested or recommended that we have this steering committee vet those comments and make a decision about whether or not they should go into our content curriculum frameworks and standards. Lastly, again, securing funds so that the educators and the external committees can be expanded. Next slide. So in general, the standards subcommittee, their recommendations, first and foremost, was that the state superintendent of public instruction approve the edits to the curriculum frameworks for Virginia Studies, US 1, US 2, and Virginia and US history courses. They also recommended in general that we should revise the standards review process and the practices to be more inclusive and of diverse perspectives. They recommended that the board consider the 10 concepts that they came together with to ensure that African American history is intricately incorporated as a comprehensive history. And lastly, they recommended that the board approve that history is required at all levels, K-12, to ensure that all of our Virginia citizens are educated about history, about the history of Virginia and our nation. So what does all of this mean? The department has begun to implement many of those recommendations. We started October 15th, 2020. The board did approve the recommended edits for made by the commission, and a majority of those recommendations were implemented into the current curriculum frameworks for those identified courses. Some of the recommendations, I don't want to say many, some of the recommendations were identified for the larger review process, so they will be considered as we begin the review and revision of the history and social science standards of learning. The curriculum frameworks that were identified by the commission have been updated, and I am happy to say that they are now posted on the DOE website, the History and Social Science webpage. The History and Social Science program, we began with a webinar for our content specialists to review those recommendations and determine how we can best support the edits at the local school division for their local curriculum development. Next slide. From that meeting, I am happy to say that in collaboration with Go Open VA, the Virginia Social Studies Leadership Consortium has formed the Dr. Carter G. Woodson Collaborative. This collaborative will work with local museums and other organizations to curate and create resources of the approved edits. So they are specifically looking at the recommendations, the approved edits to the curriculum frameworks for those identified courses, and they are creating resources for those specific recommendations. Those resources will be available hopefully by the end of spring through Go Open VA. And as Dr. Lane said earlier, there was tremendous interest in serving on this advisory committee. So we did pull a select group of educators to serve on the instructional advisory committee so that they can look at resources in the culturally relevant teaching space and using the tools of the Virginia Roadmap to Equity to evaluate the resources. And the first group of resources that they're going to start with are the resources that are going to be curated and created by the Dr. Carter G. Woodson Collaborative. And then lastly, in also looking at the recommendations from the process work group on January 28th, 2021, the department will take a projected timeline of the review and revision of the 2015 History and Social Science standards to the board for approval, and then we will start that process. So I am very, very excited that this committee is beginning its work so we can take all of this into consideration as we create a document that is more inclusive and representative of not only the Commonwealth, but every student that sits in our classrooms. So now I will turn it over to Leah to tell you all about the professional development recommendations.
Thank you, Christania. And thank you, everyone. It's so great to be here with you all this afternoon. I loved hearing everyone's introductions. And though I was part of the team that vetted the applicants, it just is so wonderful to see this diverse representation here on this commission that's really going to help to inform the development of much of our work at the department going forward in this area. So welcome to Team EdEquity VA officially. So as we begin the discussion about professional development, you can see here that this particular subcommittee though they had many, many recommendations, they really did prioritize their recommendations into sort of 6 items that they wanted the legislature to consider and the governor to consider for legislation. And I'm going to go through what those were and provide a bit of an update as to where we are with them now. So the first was to revise Virginia's teacher evaluation regulations and uniform performance standards to require that teachers be evaluated for CR efficacy. This was one that didn't actually require legislative mandate, as we were already in process of revising those standards. And I'll talk more about where we are in that process, but our state board will actually begin review of those revised standards at their January meeting. They'll be submitted for first review, and we were able to add a new standard that does address efficacy for culturally responsive teaching. The second one was to require that every Virginia educator certify that they've completed or enrolled in cultural competency professional development by the beginning of the 2022 academic year. I'm pleased to announce that this has been included in a legislative proposal from the governor's office, and I think the secretary mentioned a little bit about that. I'll talk more detail and tell you exactly how that language is worded later on in our conversation this afternoon. Also, to allocate funding and personnel resources to support the development and implementation of a comprehensive professional development strategy for the state to ensure that all educators, regardless of whether or not they're a teacher, counselor, anyone who interacts with our students really does receive training in cultural responsive practice, and that we are able to provide support for that on an ongoing basis. And pleased to also announce that that was included in the governor's proposed budget amendments this year. Also, to amend the requirements for licensure endorsements in history and social science to require evidence of course study in African American history in order to be receive an endorsement for history and social science. That also has been included in the governor's legislation. And then 2 of the other related legislative recommendations that don't speak specifically to the charge of this commission, but I do want to at least let you all know what they were. And that was to mandate certification or continuing education units in African American history for all holders of education licenses. So this is a little bit different than evidence of course study, but some sort of continuing education unit for all educators in the state in the content of African American history. And then require a credit in African American history as a new requirement for graduation in Virginia. So tangentially related, though not specific to the charge of this committee. And therefore you see that there's an NA next to those. So here again, these are all of the recommendations that were put forth by the commission. And then one of the other general recommendations that they had was to establish minimum criteria for state-approved professional development in the following areas. And so we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about each one of these terms, what it means and how it relates to creating a culturally proficient educator workforce in the Commonwealth. But the commission did identify these as critical components to be defined and minimum standards established at the state level for this work going forward. And as you are aware, this is also a part of your committee's charge. And so I hope that you all are beginning to see that we're not really starting from 0.0 with this committee's work. There's been a lot of pre-work done, and this is really a continuation of some of the groundwork that's been laid both by our commission and the work of DOE over the last couple of years. And then finally, one of the things that was critically useful to our work at the department and should inform the work of this committee as well was that the African American History Education Commission did establish what they called culturally responsive practice framed in 4 critical levels. And so they looked at what would be the requirements to say that a school is culturally responsive. What does culturally responsive leadership look like? What are the competencies and components of that? What are culturally responsive educators? How do you recognize that and know that that's happening? And then what is culturally responsive pedagogy? And so they created a quadrant document that really lays out the foundation for each one of those critical levels of culturally responsive education. And so I'll talk a little bit more about what those look like and what those components are, which can ground the work that we're doing on this committee as well. And that leads me into the next part of the presentation. And I apologize just in advance that this seems like we're doing a lot of talking at you. But one of the things that was really important to us as we really sort of thought about how we're going to craft the work of this committee was that we don't want you all to start from zero, because you're not really starting from zero. There's been a lot of groundwork done and baseline sort of established. And we really want this to be iterative of the work that's already taken place over the last couple of years across the state. So what I want to lay out for you is really what our vision of a culturally proficient education looks like in the Commonwealth. And we look at it from very multiple lenses, right? So we look at what does it take from the educator? What does it take on the curriculum side? What does it take in terms of school culture and climate? How do all of those pieces work together to ensure that all of our students, when they enter into our classrooms and experience a public education in Virginia, that they are affirmed, enriched, and prepared to navigate a global society? So I want to start with just this quote from Ralph Ellison, because I think this really does ground out our work so well, and it really states the why. Why does this matter? Why is this important? And Ralph Ellison said, "If you can show me how I can cling to that which is real to me while teaching me a way into the larger society, then and only then will I drop my defenses and hostility. I will sing your praises and help you to make the desert bear fruit." I think that is just so beautiful and so adequately really speaks to why we're even having conversation about culturally relevant, culturally responsive practice. So in the Commonwealth, we've been throwing around all of these terms: culturally relevant pedagogy, culturally responsive education, cultural competency, culturally relevant and responsive teaching. Each of them are nuanced a little bit. As Dr. Underwood stated at the beginning of our meeting, we were so fortunate to have Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, who is, quite frankly, the godmother of this work, right? And she literally wrote the book on it. She coined the phrase. And I asked her the question when she joined us here in Virginia, what she thought about sort of all of these iterations of her work. And what she said is, it doesn't matter what you call it, it matters if you're doing it. She doesn't care what the title is. And she literally coined the phrase. So we're not going to get so caught up in these terms, but I do want to sort of just guide us through what the research and what the scholars who have really been in the trenches in this space are saying about each one of these different terms. So culture is defined as customary beliefs, values, social forms, and material traits of racial, ethnic, religious, and social groups. It's the integrated pattern of human knowledge, belief, and behavior that depends upon the capacity for learning and transmitting knowledge to succeeding generations. And it's that second part of the definition that I think really does speak to our charge and the work that we're going to be embarking upon in this committee. What's the landscape in Virginia for us to be having this conversation? We need to stay rooted in this too, right? And that is that in Virginia, while more than 52% of our student population, enrolled students in the Commonwealth, are students of color, our teaching workforce is 82% white. And we're not going to hire our way out of that, right? Like that's like actually not statistically possible. So we have to have multiple strategies to address this deficiency. And what we know is that increasing the cultural proficiency of our educator workforce will go a long way in ensuring that the majority of our students, but really all of our students, are able to have a high quality public education that is relevant to their own lived experiences. So in the Commonwealth, we released recently last year our roadmap to equity, or Navigating at Equity VA. And all of you all have a copy of that in your folder for this committee. And that roadmap really does focus on two key strategies for advancing equity in the Commonwealth. The first is closing opportunity gaps, and the second is increasing the cultural competency of Virginia's educator workforce. So really clear alignment, right, between the work of this committee and the strategy that this Commonwealth has established for advancing education equity in the state. As a part of that framework, and that's a little picture of our book, we also created what we call the Centering Equity Compass, or Virginia's Equity 5 Cs. And this compass really does provide a framework and sort of guidepost for how we should approach, the lens through which we should approach all of our work going forward. And it identifies 5 critical competencies that are necessary to advance equity in the state. Those are there for you on the slide. I'm not going to go through and read each one of them, but I just wanted to make reference to it and let you know that if you access the document that's in your folder, you can read much more in depth about each one of those competencies and how we at the department are supporting that implementation. So one of the things that was really, really important in this work was that, oops, wrong way. So one of the things that's critically important in this work is that we set some standard definitions around all of these terms that we've been using. We want to make sure that our local school districts, our local school divisions are able to be grounded in the same idea or notion of what cultural competency is. So we define cultural competency, and we took this directly from the National Education Association's definition, which is having an awareness of one's own cultural identity and views about difference, and the ability to learn and build on the varying cultural and community norms of students and their families. Most importantly, it's the ability to understand within group difference that make each student unique, while also celebrating the in-between group variations that make our country a tapestry. When we get into culturally relevant and responsive teaching, the research defines it as the behavioral expressions of knowledge, beliefs, and values, right? It's very similar to what Webster says, that recognize the importance of racial and cultural diversity in learning. It's an approach that emphasizes using cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles of ethnically diverse students to make learning encounters more relevant to and effective for them. And then cultural proficiency is defined as environments that create opportunities for access, empowerment, and achievement by acknowledging, valuing, advocating, and empowering cultural diversity in all aspects of the educational process. And we really view cultural proficiency not as a thing or even a destination, but as a process, right? It's an ever-going process that requires continuous learning and reflection. And then finally, back to culturally relevant pedagogy, coined by Dr. Ladson-Billings as pedagogy that recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. Ladson-Billings went further to say that for culturally relevant pedagogy to exist, it must yield academic success. It must help students to develop positive ethnic and cultural identities while simultaneously helping them to achieve academically. And third, it must be teaching that supports a student's ability to recognize, understand, and critique current and past social inequities. By centering these goals in practice, culturally relevant practitioners can empower students not only intellectually, but also socially, emotionally, and politically. So we were so fortunate, as I said, to have Dr. Ladson-Billings join us at our EdEquity VA Week symposiums just a month ago in December. And one of the things that she said, I wrote down and I said, I'm gonna use that. And this committee meeting gave me an opportunity to really use this. And so what Dr. Ladson-Billings said was that our curriculum and instruction should be both a window and a mirror, right? So it needs to be something where we can see what we don't necessarily know, but also that we can see ourselves reflected in. So what does that actually look like? Windows provide diverse groups, our curriculum and instruction that demonstrate that diverse groups from all rings of culture are represented, validated, and affirmed. It excludes stereotypes and perceived deficiencies of historically marginalized individuals and oppressed cultures in the narrative. And females and differently abled characters are portrayed in a variety of roles. When we have mirrors represented in our curriculum and instruction, they utilize students' culture as vehicles for learning. They foster learning communities where heritages and identities are valued. And they are curriculum and instruction that mitigate power imbalances based on race, culture, ethnicity, and class. And did my slide go away? Diverse ethnicities and nationalities are authentically represented. Mirrors and windows. And so I really think this is a beautiful way of thinking about this work, that our curriculum framework, our standards, our pedagogy, the resources that we provide to support instruction need to all be both windows and mirrors. As I mentioned, the African American History Education Commission really identified culturally responsive practice at 4 critical levels. And so here you see a matrix of each one of those levels. This information is also on our website, and we'll be sharing these slides out in the Dropbox later. But I went ahead and highlighted sort of from within each one of those quadrants, the pieces that connect most specifically to the charge of this committee. So under culturally responsive schools, we say that they have an educational environment that is free from implicit and explicit racial, ethnic, and gender biases. That speaks specifically to our charge. For culturally responsive leadership, leaders who accept cultural responsiveness as endemic to effectiveness in all areas of learning for students from all ethnic groups. And these are leaders who evaluate culturally responsive efficacy during teacher observations and evaluation. Culturally responsive educators promote respect for student differences. They cultivate relationships beyond the classroom that are anchored in affirmation, mutual respect, and validation. And they engage in reflection of their beliefs, behaviors, and practices, communicating in linguistic and culturally responsive ways. And then finally, when we get to pedagogy and teaching, it is pedagogy that uses cultural differences as assets necessary to inform the development of instructional resources and utilize students' culture as vehicles for learning. So going back to our roadmap for equity, which really focuses in on increasing the cultural competency of our workforce, we've identified sort of the conduits to how we think we're going to get there. What are the tactics or inputs that are going to be necessary for the department to focus resources on to support this increase that we want to see happening? Those include increasing teacher diversity, supporting culturally relevant teaching pedagogy, enhancing teacher preparation to include CR, amending our teacher license. Sound familiar, right? This all aligns directly to many of the charges of this committee. Developing new professional learning opportunities, supporting courageous leaders, revising educator evaluation to include cultural competency efficacy, and incorporating cultural responsiveness and inclusion into school climate evaluation. It's really nice when things sort of all come together in a nice little bow. And so one of the reasons why we really thought it important to share this information from you is because we don't want this work that this committee does to happen in a silo from all of the other work that has been happening and that is currently underway, both at the department, with our state board, and with initiatives out of the Secretary of Education's office and the governor's office. So to support this within our framework, I'm not going to read these. I just want to show you, these are the pages from our framework that really hone in on this culturally responsive educator, increasing that proficiency level. We again go through defining and identifying the competencies. We provide links to resources to support that work. And most importantly, we developed an audit tool to assist local school district, school leaders, principals, and educators with auditing their practice and their own professional development plans to determine whether or not they're actually doing the things that align to advancing cultural responsiveness in their school communities. Likewise, on curriculum reframing, same thing. We indicate what are the necessary competencies in order to reframe curriculum. We provide and lay out resources to support that work. And then we provide a companion audit tool that asks the critical and essential questions to help school leaders and curriculum writers and even selecting textbooks, right? What are the critical questions that we need to be asking to ensure that we're applying an equity lens to that work? And then as a follow-on to that, I wanted to sort of lay out for everyone under what we call the EdEquity VA umbrella, there are some really significant things that are currently happening or have happened or are underway. And we want to walk you all through what those things are. I mentioned already that the governor is introducing legislation that will address many of the recommendations of the African American History Education Commission that related specifically to professional development that's necessary to advance equity in the Commonwealth. This language that's here on the slide is taken directly from what we know will be proposed legislation, and that includes that every person seeking an initial licensure or renewal of a license shall complete instruction in or training in cultural competency, that every person seeking initial licensure or renewal of a license with an endorsement in history and social science, right, we talked about this, will complete instruction in African American history as prescribed by the Board of Education. So it directs the board to prescribe the parameters for that. Each school board shall adopt and implement policies that require each teacher and other school board employees holding a license issued by the Board of Education to complete a cultural competency training in accordance with the guidance issued by the Board of Education at least every 2 years. And that the Board of Education shall issue minimum guidance for cultural competency training by December 31st, 2021. And that's part of the work of this committee to inform the development of that. And that required training must be completed at least once by each teacher and license holder by the beginning of the 2022-23 academic year. And then finally, that teacher evaluation should include cultural proficiency efficacy as a part of the evaluation process. This right here, if you don't know, this will set a national standard. There is no other state that has as comprehensive of an approach to ensuring that they have a culturally proficient educator workforce. And we are so proud of this. And the work of this committee is to prepare our board to have those, to set and establish those criteria for adequate professional development. What are the minimum criteria that must be included? And how do we ensure that our students, teachers, families enter and exist in learning communities that are free of bias and are anti-racist? Additionally, the governor's budget allocated funding and personnel resources to develop and disseminate comprehensive professional development in the areas of cultural competence and culturally responsive pedagogy for all Virginia educators. And this includes actual personnel resources for the department that will be dedicated to just this work. And so we're so pleased to see that and very excited to get that individual on board and working. And then other ways we're supporting professional development include our EdEquity VA virtual conferences and webinars, which you've heard us talk about. This summer, in collaboration with the Office of History and Social Science, it's really this was Christania's brainchild, but I put it on my list, and that is she will be convening a Teaching Black History conference that will spend a day really focusing in on teaching Black history through a culturally sustaining pedagogy to ensure that as our new standards roll out or those edits roll out that were recommended by the African American History Education Commission, that our educator workforce is prepared to teach that content. And we will be doubling on to that with our equity conference, spending a day focused on culturally responsive pedagogy as well. And then we are developing content and resources, as Christania mentioned, for our OER Go Open Virginia platform. In addition to that, we released our framework, and I just want to tell you a few things that are in the framework that include defining culturally responsive practice for Virginia educators. We've established the 4 critical levels, which I went through. We released a comprehensive audit tool. We're developing a model curriculum audit tool, and also developing a model anti-racism, anti-bias policy. And that's something that's actually in progress, and we actually have a draft. And so we're really, I'm looking forward to sharing that with the professional development committee, subcommittee of this group, to bring that into alignment with the charge of this committee to develop policy around anti-bias. And then finally on teacher efficacy, again, I already mentioned that we added a new standard to the guidelines for uniform performance standards and evaluation criteria for teachers on culturally responsive teaching and equitable practices. And that will go before our Board of Education on first review at its January meeting. So in closing of my part of the presentation, I leave us with another quote because I love the words of others when I can't find the words myself. And it's really a quote from Paulo Freire, who wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And in that book, he says that education either functions as an instrument which is used to facilitate the integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system and bring about conformity, or it becomes the practice of freedom, the means by which men and women deal critically and creatively with the reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of their world. And I think while it's a beautiful quote, what really strikes me about this quote is that it talks about the difference between education for conformity or education that allows you to think critically and deal with the reality and the complexities of the world you live in so that you can participate in its transformation. And if you don't think that's the purpose of public education, if that's not our mission, if that's not our charge, then I don't really know what is. So the work that you're doing on this committee is so critically important, not just to us at the department, but to future generations of graduates of Virginia's public schools. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to my colleague, Holly Coy, and she's going to share a little bit with you about how we envision our work going forward. I promise, we will not sit in any more meetings where we do all of the talking. We will actually be turning this all over to you all in the future, but Holly Coy, please come to the forefront and unmute yourself.
Thanks so much, Aaliyah. Really appreciate you and the presentation and the work behind the presentation that you have shared with all of us this afternoon. Thank you all for sticking with us. I'm going to add to the sentiments of my colleagues and apologize that this is a bit of a lot of us talking to you and providing updates and context for this work as we embark on this journey together. Our meetings will not at all be like this. And so that's a good segue to this visioning discussion about where are we headed. At the beginning of our conversation today, Dr. Lane shared a little bit with each of you about our work plan and our schedule as we move forward. I know we've shared that with all of you, and about kind of this concept of breaking into subcommittees. And so as we envision this and our work together over the next 6 months, we plan to break into 2 subcommittees, one really focused on the professional development and the other on our standards. And it is in those subcommittees that we will really dive into the meat of all of this, and within the context and building on the foundation of where we are presently and the work that has been done to date, really fleshing out a vision for continued and renewed work and pushes forward and policy changes in this space. And so as we think about the next few months, at our next meeting in February, we'll plan to spend a lot of time in those subcommittee conversations, developing work plans, identifying kind of key priorities within that bucket of work and embarking on that together. But we don't want to leave here today without kind of capturing some of the ideas, thoughts, reflections that you may have had as we've tried to provide this foundation today. Recognizing that we are also up against the time, what I thought I would do is open the floor just for a few minutes, and we'd love to hear from you all. If there are ideas, top of mind kind of reflections on where do we go from here? What would be a measure of success for our group? what would those recommendations look like when we turn it over to policymakers in July? Feel free to also drop your ideas, reflections, and thoughts in the chat, and we'll do our best to capture those out of the chat. Again, really just before we segue into public comment, really want to hear from you all about what we think about the work that remains to be done. You've heard a lot today about different pieces, different structures, different kind of systems in place that will work within, and those are important. But we know that in our shared vision for this really inclusive education for our children and equipping our educators with the skills they need to deliver that high quality education, that's not a reality in every classroom in the Commonwealth yet. And so as we think about that delta and think about our recommendations in kind of going from the here and now to the final reality, the vision that we all see for inclusive education in the Commonwealth, are there particular things that come to the surface? And I've got one eye on the chat as I invite you all to jump in here. We won't spend too much time on this today, again, being cognizant of our time constraints. But is there anybody who has something burning top of mind that they'd like to share as we kind of close out our reflections here?
And as we open the mic up, Holly, too, I do want to certainly take a moment. There were a couple of comments in the chat already, just to acknowledge that we are aware that there is some violence happening in Washington, D.C. at the present moment. And while we are focused on this meeting, we can't help but be a bit distracted by what's happening in our nation's capital. And, certainly hope and extend our thoughts and prayers that everyone is safe, though it doesn't seem that is actually the case. And so we are, I think I share with my colleagues at the department, I'm very disappointed to learn the news of what's happening in our capital right now. But I think it also really does frame why this work is so important, right? Why it matters that our students understand history and the true stories and varied perspectives, and that they're able to respect and acknowledge difference of opinion and thoughts in ways that are productive and not confrontational. So while I recognize and acknowledge we are all distracted by what's happening, I think it also lends urgency to the work that we have before us on this committee. And so with that, feel free to unmute yourself and speak to the work, or if there's something else you need to share, please feel free to do that.
I want to go. Hi there. I just really wanted to say, and we haven't really discussed this, but and it's not so much short term, but long term. We know that we're making a difference when we can no longer predict our educational outcomes of Black and Latino youth by race and ethnicity, right? So once we're at a point where we can't do those predictors anymore, we know we're doing the work. And ethnic studies and knowing your history, research shows that kids pay attention and they do well when they're learning about things that are important to them. And we have statistics showing that. I come from Tucson, where our ethnic studies programs were disbanded. And I just want to say that we have tons of data showing that our kids have higher graduation rates. They do better in all of their classes across the board, not just their history courses. And so this is really important work. And again, I just, long term, right? The day that we can no longer predict outcomes by race and ethnicity, we know we're on it. So I'm just excited to be part of this group.
And that's exactly how we define education equity for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So thank you so much for those comments. Ms. Nasser, I believe you had your hand raised.
I actually wrote it in the chat, but I just wanted to say very quickly that we do represent different groups. So we are as diverse representing our school systems as the kids and the families we work with. So I think that there might be a need here to remember that our initiative is to achieve equity for all, bigger groups, smaller groups, bigger representation, smaller ones, and the collaborative environment trying to achieve that for all in the subgroups and in the different conversation would be actually essential.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Leah, it's Dr. Monroe. If I can just share something as well. I just want to make sure that whatever we do is measurable, you know, and that people can really see, hear, and feel the efforts of this committee, whether it's through policy, whether it's through data, again, whether it's through informal or formal audits. But I just want to make sure that people can feel and see that something different is happening in Virginia because of our work. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria, you're muted.
I'm super excited about the Virginia Teachers Growing an Equity Literacy Lens and understanding what so many people in the field of neuroscience, psychology, and sociology have said about culturally responsive instruction, that it will deepen learning and that will provide not only teachers, but our students that we serve with a socially conscious lens. And who doesn't want our up and rising world leaders to be raised in a K-12 education with that type of development? So it is super exciting. And I thank you for the work that you and all of you are leading today.
Great. And do our committee chairs have any comments as we prepare to open up for public comment? Senator Boysko.
I just want to reiterate this is really a dream come true for me. I grew up in Alabama and Arkansas, a segregated area, seeing racial divides, raised my children in Northern Virginia where there was an inclusive and very supportive community. But what we are seeing right now in Washington and around the country is so damaging. It feeds my soul to see that we are trying to do something in our community to make the world a better place. And education is the front and center of it. And you educators, I just cannot say enough positive about what you do every single day. And I think this is going to change the lives of all those little kids who feel like they are the other one. And just appreciate that we are embarking on this wonderful effort in Virginia. So thank you so much for everything that you've done so far and what we're gonna do.
Thank you, Senator. Dean Dare.
I'm just so excited to be a part of this, and this is impactful work. This is work that will have generational impact. And we don't talk, we talk a lot about equity, and we don't align the work that we do even to economic development. We're not going to be able to get close to our potential as a country, as a nation, unless we can do a much better job educating our poor, educating underrepresented minorities, getting both of those groups and women in STEM. So some could even make an argument that this is an economic priority, a national defense priority, along with a social justice and racial equity priority.
Thank you. And Dr. Duran.
Yes, thank you. I echo my co-chairs' statements and what they've just said, but I want to just add another piece. I think as we engage in this work, what's really, really critical is what are our outcomes? I'm seeing we're having some good discussions here, and most of us listening to everyone introduce themselves are deep in this work, and we do this work every day. How do we use this committee to really effectuate making solid recommendations that are going to be achievable? So some short-term ones, I'd like us as we move forward in our work, what can we get done short-term? What are some substantive changes that we actually can propose to either the Board of Education, to the General Assembly, or is it some resources that we can provide from Virginia Department of Education? What are some short-term immediate things that I think that our communities, whether they are our teachers, our parents, need to see that this work that we're doing is actually happening right away and what the impact is. And then what are our long-term objectives and goals? Because this will take some time to shift and change how we approach teaching, how we approach respecting, how we approach honoring, and how we really truly are inclusive of all is not going to happen overnight for the long run. It's a long road ahead of us. I know this committee is a short-term committee in terms of the time we have by the end of June. But what can we do that's going to lay the groundwork for long-term work? So I hope that we'll do that as we move forward. It's kind of chunk those things in ways that are really doable, and then long-term work. Policies, assessment. We didn't talk a lot about assessment today, but I think that's a huge one in terms of how students are assessed, even on SOLs, the types of questions, et cetera. There's so much that we can be doing, and I'm excited because I see and hear from the members of this group that we will do that. And so I just want to echo that and push us all as we think, what does this mean in effect? How does this turn into an actionable item? And that's what I look forward to hearing. And again, representing the Virginia Board of Ed on this, what are things that I can take back to my colleagues that we can act on quickly through the ability that we have. So thank you very much, everyone. Look forward to moving forward in this group.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. And so at this time, we want to open up the floor for our public comment period. And we do have about 12 individuals registered as attendees for this meeting. And so if you are seeking to make public comment at this moment, please use the raise your hand feature so that we can promote you and hear your public comment. And for those of our committee members who need to leave right at 4 o'clock, thank you so much. This will, all of the public comments will also be posted in the folder, so you will still have access to hear from everyone who leaves a public comment with us today. Okay, so I am not seeing any hands raised at the moment. Tim Kaiser, let's see. All right, we have one hand raised, and so I am turning on your microphone at this point, Mr. Kaiser, and you may begin your public comment. You have 2 minutes, sir. Mr. Kaiser, you might need to unmute yourself if you're speaking. We can't hear you. Okay. Are you there, Mr. Kaiser? All right. Unfortunately, we're not seeing or hearing you, Mr. Kaiser. Want to give you an opportunity, however, you can unmute or.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I knew that would happen. Thank you very much. And thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. I'm a social studies and gifted resource teacher and representative of my school's social justice and equity team. And my question concerns representation and inclusion of LGBTQ+ individuals as they pertains to everything you've shared today. The reason my group at my school are concerned is because, in short, we've seen instances lately where new learning activities and informative materials and professional training sessions, et cetera, as they relate to marginalized groups are required, whereas those pertaining to the LGBTQ+ community are optional for both teachers to attend if it pertains to PD, or optional for them to present to classes. And this gray area, it's a gray area where we're told that, in short, the matters of race, ethnicity, and religion, et cetera, versus gender and sexual orientation are apples and oranges. And an individual's beliefs about the morality of the subject must be considered. And so my group wanted to ask this committee if you can affirm that the LGBTQ+ population will receive the exact same consideration and representation as the other groups. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comment. And I think if you were here for the entire meeting, you would note that we do have representation from that stakeholder group here on this committee, and it certainly has been a part of our intentional work of EdEquity VA. Since you asked a specific question, I wanted to address that. Are there any other public comment seekers at this time? Okay. Hearing none, I will turn the mic back over to Dr. Lane to close us out for the day. And I look forward again to working with each and every one of you over the next several months. Dr. Lane.
Well, thank you. And thank you to all of our presenters today and everyone that made comments. The work that we do together is so important. And as with Leah, I know we'll all be thinking about our country over the coming days. I will keep it brief because we are 5 minutes over. I just want to thank you for choosing to join this committee, for those of you that applied, for applying to the committee. And I really and truly look forward to this work. Working together to create cultural competence for educators and culturally relevant education for students and all students is so essential to maximizing the potential of every child in the Commonwealth, which is really what we're all about. So I look forward to our journey in the coming months and really appreciate your service to the Commonwealth on this committee. And I will see you next month.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.